position, Karen, but to me, you're the ecological planner at Los Cienegos. That's where you are in my heart, okay? Probably for many of us here who've worked with you. So I'd like to introduce Karen Sims in that role, and if she wants to expand that to her other positions, I'll leave that up to her. Thank you. Have a bad back right now, so I'm gonna have to do this from sitting on the stool so that I don't get really bad sciatica. But first challenge is getting up here. Hi, everybody. So as Linda said, I don't have PowerPoint either. Where's Ian? But I have an appointment with Ian to talk about PowerPoints. So we asked him to do so many talks. Oh my gosh. Thank you. So I am technically the Assistant Field Manager for the Bureau of Land Management in Tucson, which means I'm the second in charge in the BLM office. And our field office covers about 700,000 acres. It's really scattered land compared to a lot of BLM offices all around the Tucson Basin. We go about over to Douglas, we go north of the Gila River, and we go over to the Tohono O'odham Nation. And so we have a lot of area that we cover, but near and dear to my heart, because my other part of my job is being the manager for Los Cienegos National Conservation Area. And I started out there, it's almost 30 years, guys, if you can believe it, this August, as the wildlife biologist on Los Cienegos. I did that for a number of years, and then I became the planner and was the lead for the Los Cienegos Resource Management Plan, which we finished in 2003, and then I kind of stayed in that ecosystem planner, as Linda said. That's been the longest part of my career, but 5 years ago I became the manager. And so that's about me. The second question we needed to answer was, how do we use science? And I think my first answer to this, and I'm going to really focus these questions on predominantly the Cienegos. It absolutely, in our field office, that and the San Pedro Riparian National Conservation Area right now get the bulk of our focus on scientific research, because they're such, amazing, diverse systems, and they do attract a lot of research. So that's really going to be my focus. So I really would say for Los Cienegos, we use science for just almost everything we do. And I'm using science in the broad sense of being everything from, monitoring all the way up to true research with a hypothesis that you're testing. And so just talking a little bit about how we've used that over the years, and I'm going to be the one that you're going to have to watch. Maybe I get to a little bit of Daisy's time. I don't know if she used hers all up or not. So the first part of it was, from the time that I first started working out there until we started really seriously working on the resource management plan, we had the luxury back then, my husband Jeff, who's over here, and I, we started out living out there. They didn't really know what they wanted us to do, so we collected a whole lot of baseline inventory data back in the day. And that, coupled with additional inventories up until 1995, really formed a nice baseline for our resource management plan. So that's the first way it got used is, what do we know about this area? What is the baseline condition of this area? And there's information that goes back way earlier than that, for sure, but that's where I came into the picture. And that really contributed to helping us excuse me, establish objectives in our resource management plan. What is it we want? How do we want this area to look and be into the future? And as quantitatively as possible. And so we found we almost had, sometimes I think like Ian said, it feels like you have almost too much data and you get kind of a little bit lost in that data. And so we actually formed a partnership, where's Gita? There, with the Nature Conservancy in 2004, as part of our whole Sonoyta Valley Planning Partnership process to help us really address that. What is it that we should do in an ecological monitoring program on Los Cienegos that really is going to help us look at those objectives we established. We found there were some things we were monitoring that really weren't telling us much of anything, and weren't really helping us determine if we were meeting those objectives. So those things we were able to kind of transition out of and focus more on those kinds of monitoring that were helping us better understand the conditions and our objectives out there. Out of that collaboration, and I encourage those of you that haven't gone on the Nature Conservancy science website, Gita, maybe I'll put that web address up for everybody, because I know there's quite a few people that haven't been here before. But we did a series of technical reports. One was on grasslands, grassland upland areas. One was on riparian areas. One was on fish. Did I forget any? So that's probably good too. We'll talk more. Yeah. So that was where we really took like all of this, and I'm sure other agency people and probably other people have been in this. We have file cabinets, drawers full of all this data, and we compiled a lot of that for the resource management plan. But Gita helped us really focus that into these technical reports, and they've been very valuable in the work that we've done. We kind of transitioned and continued doing that monitoring, and then we started implementing our resource management plan. And then we were needing to know how effective are these treatments that we're doing? How effective is our mesquite control? How effective are our prescribed burns? Our restoration efforts for some of the listed species and some of the other species out there that are priority key species in that plan. And so that led to other efforts to look at monitoring techniques, which the Nature Conservancy, others really helped us focus on. And so out of that came a report on saccatone areas and another report on vegetation treatments. These are all available on that website. All of these kind of filtered into the way that we manage Las Ciénegas, and it's really an adaptive, flexible management has been the focus of that area. Trying to have these natural systems in good health and functioning, but be able to be flexible. Sometimes that flexibility gets stretched to the limits, but it's what we're about. We don't want to just say, Ian, you can go in this house for 2 weeks and stay there and don't move anywhere else, or this recreation person or this other project can only do things a certain way. We really want to build into all of those the maximum flexibility needed. And by collecting all this data, it helps us validate the direction that we go. And so around that, those of you that haven't heard it before, we established a process called biological planning. And I certainly will invite any of you to come talk to me at the break. If you're interested in participating in that, I will put a little sign-up sheet in the back because it's relevant to something else I'll be talking about later. But we get together in the fall. It's focused on upland areas and heritage? No. Landscape. Thank you. See, I got to keep myself straight with all this help. And we focus a lot on grazing management and wildlife management, especially as it relates to those two areas. In the fall, you get a lot of input on how Ian gets a lot of input, probably more than he wants sometimes. But it's also the way he can explain to everybody. It's a two-way dialogue. It's the way he can explain to everybody why things changed. And that's built so much trust and so much partnership in this area. So basically the way the process works is 2 times a year. Anyone that's interested joins us for a series of presentations and then a field tour around Las Ciénegas. And we talk about trends and resources, projects we have coming up, different kinds of things depending on what's pressing at the time. And then we also have some technical teams. These are self-selected voluntary teams. Anyone's welcome to join any of them. And they help us get additional input into our whole flexible adaptive management type program. So wanted to make sure I brought that up. The other thing that we do that goes beyond all of this monitoring, which is really, as Daisy said, like we at the BLM office, we're multiple use sustained yield. We do have these special areas, our national conservation lands, our monuments in national conservation areas where there's more of an emphasis on conservation and that sustained yield side, but we still do have multiple uses. We recognize those are, valid uses even on those conservation lands. So we have grazing, we have recreation, we have hunting. We have a lot of different uses. About the only one that usually gets excluded is mining on those properties. But so we do a lot of this monitoring, but we really try to facilitate and encourage research to happen. Because you can get a lot of information out of monitoring, but you're not going to get the cause necessarily. So you're going to find out that, yeah, all of a sudden we have a downward trend in something, but do we know necessarily why? Not always, and frequently not. And that's where the science and the true research comes in, is to help us understand some of those factors. A lot of these posters on the walls and a lot of the presentations today have been focused in part or entirely on Los Cienegos. And every one of them helps us, thank you, see? Every one of them helps us better understand the area, do better managing it, so it's really, really important. So I'll just go to some specific examples. I'm trying to be really careful, not to steal anybody's thunder of any of the presentations or the posters, because it's like, there's so much, probably fully 2/3 of the people in this room are some of the partners that we have out there and the researchers. So just to kind of build on things, some of the things that have come out of recent research or monitoring projects. One is we've had Dr. Bob Steidel and Eric Anderson from, I think they gave a talk last year, right? Because I wasn't here last year, so I didn't get to see it. But they have been doing research out there for a number of years, over a decade, on the avian response to the vegetation treatments. And that's been really important for us to understand, because yes, we have objectives that we want the grasslands to be in a very good ecological condition, similar to reference sites that don't necessarily have a lot of uses on them. And that is then associated with a certain community. And we know that, I believe the figure is in North America, fully 98% of our native grasslands are gone. And that's pretty significant. I think a lot of people don't really realize that, because they see grasslands, but they don't know that a lot of those grasslands aren't native grasslands anymore. So it's been important for us to know that we had that response. And then the work that the Arizona Antelope Foundation and Game and Fish have been doing with the pronghorn, and the figures that we're getting from them, that I believe we've gone from around less than 100 pronghorn to over 300, is that correct? Yeah. That kind of feedback really tells us, hey, we're doing something that's making a difference out here with this restoration work that we've been doing, with removing mesquite and with modifying fences and with putting in waters. And that's a species that a lot of our visitors really like to see. I like to see them. I always get excited every time I drive in, and there they are. I saw a fawn on there. All right, so another example. So we've learned some things about precipitation in relationship to some of the treatments that we do. We've learned that through a science paper that Gita recently did with Marcos, right? If I get this wrong, you can correct me. That spring precipitation is one of the best indicators of perennial grass response. All right, and hopefully that doesn't rain on any parades. Okay, then winter precipitation is another one we have to closely look at, because it helps us understand when it's appropriate to do prescribed fires. Now, I don't know that we're going to be doing any of those in the near future. At such point as we do.
If we do, don't tell Ian.
So anyway, yeah, we'll have some more stories about that in a little bit. Right. So then another really important one has been, there's been a lot of people that have been helping us. Jean Marie being one of them, Ben, wherever you are, Dave, work on groundwater models. conceptual groundwater model for the Cienega watershed. There's a big project on the Forest Service that we're worried about might have a lot of impacts potentially on Las Cienegas and our water. And so better understanding the source of the water into our wetlands. It's called Las Cienegas because the Cienegas are one of the very important resources, the wetlands out there. So we really want to understand those. And you know, between the U of A and the Nature Conservancy and the Desert Botanic Gardens, we've really got a much better understanding now of what's going on with that water. And then the next step is applying that. You know, what is it that we could do to better protect those resources? Let's see what else. Oh, so here's another one that we don't always think about. We sometimes get a little bit of research money, and we funded Bob McCord. He gave a talk here a couple of years ago. For very little input of funds, he did an extraordinary project helping us better understand our paleontological resources on Las Cienegas. And then there's the science that kind of comes with, how much more time do I have? Because I still have a lot more to say. Then there's the kind of science that it gets associated with the treatments themselves we're doing, and I'll use our cultural archaeological resources as an important example. We have to check for where those are, so when we do this disturbance and go in and remove the mesquite, we aren't disturbing those cultural archaeological sites. And so I think we're up to 10,000 plus acres. We've actually done a class 3 survey on, which is a full pedestrian survey. That's unheard of on BLM lands, but because of, you know, we've been able to get funding to do those treatments, we've consequently been able to get a much better understanding of our heritage resources. Okay, so I'm going to go to gaps real quick because I only have like less than 5 minutes. So as Daisy said, yeah, funding and staffing, huge issue. And I fear it's only going to get worse. We're super lucky on Las Cienegas that because so many people have this really connection to the resources out here that we get a lot of partners and volunteers, and I just can't say enough about all of those partners and volunteers that help us do all kinds of stuff out there, and they really help us do our science. And without them, we'd be pretty lost. We don't even have a staff for Las Cienegas. I'm a part-time manager. We have people that work out there, but we have not one dedicated position to the NCA. So that's how we get stuff done. Another gap, I would say, is helping us identify sometimes the science that would be beneficial to us. We're like running around with our heads cut off all the time, just like crisis mode. And sometimes we don't have time to really stop and think. It's symposiums like this that help us do that. Stop and think about what do we really need. Sit down, Karen, sit down, other BLM people. Focus on what it is that is going to really be helpful to you. So that this helps us think about that. I want to mention how important the research ranch is as a partner to us. This is where a lot of the science goes on that helps us better understand our multiple use sites, because this is a really excellent reference area for that. I think I'm just going to throw this out, I think it would really be beneficial to convene some kind of a working meeting to discuss, and I'm talking about not really just monitoring, but actual science, that especially in the lieu of this fire, since that has happened, there's a lot of inputs we could get about science that would really help us take advantage of this opportunity, whether we wanted it or not, we've got it. So another thing that's really challenging for us is time. Keeping current. It's very hard for agencies, staff, and scientists to keep current on everything. I think it's hard for everybody, especially in this current world. But again, this kind of a symposium helps us stay current on the latest in science. A big one I'm going to throw out, we've talked about this before, is data storage and access. It's real easy to get all your stuff in your filing cabinets analyzed at a point in time, and then all of a sudden you look around and go, oh my God, I got all this stuff in filing cabinets again. And you know, I'm trying to get everything digital and geospatial and all of that, but that's something that I think we're going to need a lot of help with. All right, I'm going to really quickly, okay, climate change, I'm probably not even supposed to say anything about climate change, I'm pretty sure. But I will just say briefly that, maybe you can turn that, no, I'm just kidding. The biggest way that we deal with it is by being flexible and adaptable on Los Cienegos. We have done some very specific targeted things in the past with a scenario planning effort to look at different futures that we could have. It's not trying to predict what they are, but to say, here's a very broad range of futures we could have with the changes. Whether you believe that it's climate change or not doesn't matter. The weather's just always unpredictable. And so there's nothing wrong with just better understanding how to be as flexible as possible. And that's what that process helped us with. I think there's a lot more we could do with that. I really, really want to better understand for all of us in BLM, some of those adaptation strategies. And so that's another thing. And the other thing we do is keep up with some of the really basic monitoring. It's great to have precipitation, for a region, but you can't beat having that local. And Dave goes out there and helps us with that on BLM. Keep up with the temperature, precip, and so forth. We focus also on, wrapping up, focus also on resiliency. Some of our Sackatone projects, our refugia sites for T&E aquatic species help us be more resilient. Okay, what did I forget? To wrap up, what do you need from science? I think I kind of covered that number 2. I just would say that there isn't going to be much, this is how I'll wrap up, there just isn't going to be much resources except us, the staff from the federal agencies, to help with science projects. It's a fact, if I just have to say it. So we're really going to be looking to nonprofits and other entities that can help fund this really important research. And we'll be involved and help as much as we can, but I do not see the resources being there. And it's a hard thing to have to say, but that's my wrap up. So thank you.